All right, well, thank you everybody for coming today. I'm super excited to be up here and presenting with my good friend Nick on whether or not enterprises can run Habitat.
Dude, no. I know everyone gets us confused. You're Chris Maher, I'm Chris Maher. Come on.
Yeah, I'm doing it with that, Chris.
Thank God, thank God, thank God.
I mean, if you want to present, go for it. But
This is actually a very funny ongoing joke.
this happens more than you would actually think.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, congratulations on your award today.
Thank you.
All the work that you've done has really meant a lot to us and to the community as a whole. So everyone, give a warm welcome to Chris Maher and Nick Kirschbaum.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, again, thank you and welcome. We're going to start by dividing the room into two, and then we're going to break into song.
So I'll lead this section if you guys want to follow Nick.
No, not quite. But
That'd be bad.
Just want to let you know, if you've seen the keynote from our former CIO, just know that we're probably not as eloquent, but we're going to still have some fun. This is my fourth ChefConf, which is actually pretty exciting too. So the chef community has always been very helpful and supportive, and really what we wanted to do today was to share back some of our experiences as we started working with Habitat and getting going from the beginning where we knew nothing to where we are today. But before I do that, I want to quickly mention my team because I am really proud of these guys. They've done some amazing things. They got recognized today for their hard work. So with me and Chris is also Louis, Ray, Sylvan, Garen, Robbie, Edward, and Mark. Most of them are actually here with us today too. So I want to start just by giving you a little background on why we chose Habitat. Using cloud services, creating microservices, leveraging containers, that's all our future. It's probably the same for most of you here, but for us as an enterprise, that's definitely something that we want to start with now. And then as a developer, Chris wants to have his deployments work on his workstation the same as it would in production. This helps prevent issues that arise from differences in the infrastructure, regardless of how small they are, and building applications in Habitat lets us do that. And trends in IT change over time, and we want to stay on the forefront of technology. It's easy for a large enterprise that's not in a technology sector to get behind, and we just don't want that to happen to us, so we want to keep innovating and looking forward.
So today we wanted to share with you 4 different projects that we thought would be appropriate for this event. And each of them is pretty different from another, but as you will see, each of them also builds off one another. So we have an internship project, a deployment of Artifactory, an in-house application called Bootstrap, and we're going to talk about what we did with Vault and Console.
So our first real attempt at doing something in Habitat actually started months earlier with a picture that was drawn up on a whiteboard by my VP. So he just drew this picture on the whiteboard, and it just shows all of our data center locations. And then he just drew an application, and he said all he wanted it to do was to move anywhere. I mean, this is a simple idea that's certainly not new. And after hearing about Habitat, we started thinking about this picture, and I thought about how Habitat could actually help us reach that goal. So I asked Louis to explore it as an internship project when he was working with us for the summer. So he read the docs, he tried the tutorial, and it didn't take long for Louis to create a simple website. This is what it looked like, and when he deployed it, it was in a configuration that's similar to this. So the application was built in a Habitat ring, which has nodes distributed across different data centers. And then this is, in itself is pretty cool, right? So now we've got redundancy. We've got HA. We got DR capabilities. But we started asking ourselves, well, how do we load balance this? We needed to make sure that if a new leader was to take over, we wanted to make sure we sent traffic there. So we decided, well, why not ask Habitat? Habitat gives you a ton of information in JSON format. This is actually not even all of it. And then some browsers do show up better than others. But I just want to give an idea of how much information is out there. And we thought, well, it would be nicer to have a simpler web page that we could use for load balancing. So Louis made a new simplified page which shows if the node is connected and if it's a leader. Both of these values were pulled by parsing that services JSON file. And this right here is what we used for our load balancer to determine where to send the traffic. It would monitor this page on all the nodes and only send to the node where both values were true. This can now be done with a hook, but we'll talk more on that later. So this was the fun part. So for the internship demo, or for the report out, Lewis was the only one that did a live demo, which is always fun. Our senior leaders happened to be in the audience, which made it even more exciting, including the VP that drew that picture up initially. So for the demo, Lewis really wanted to show off what this pattern can do, so he forced a failure by killing the leader. And when this happened, the ring noticed, and without any intervention whatsoever, the supervisor automatically started to do a new leader election. And once the new leader was up, the load balancer automatically sent traffic there. What made the demo even better was that that random node that got selected was in a different data center. And then later when that node came back up, it returned to the ring and a chef client converge, made everything functional again. So in this demo, we simulated a failure and everything handled it beautifully. The audience loved it, everyone cheered, we all lifted Lewis on our shoulders, and there was much rejoicing. And we carried him out of the room. It was a great day. But what did we learn from all this? First of all, creating an application to run in Habitat is really not that hard. Lewis knew absolutely nothing about Habitat and was able to pick it up pretty quickly. We also learned load balancing in multiple data centers. It was a new challenge. In our initial tests, we often had a leader, which no one would talk to. But we could build our application to include a health monitor and use that to influence where the traffic was headed. However, our biggest takeaway was that building and running an application in Habitat was like entering the jet age. This was just cool, and it was fun, and it was exciting, and we learned a lot. And Lewis really did an awesome job. In fact, after he was done with his internship, we were lucky enough to keep him around a little bit longer, and he's now a full-time member of our team.
Go Lewis, that was awesome. So after that initial project, we were hungry. We saw what Habitat could do. We were getting really excited about it, and we kind of wanted to just go crazy with it. So the thing we sat down and were trying to think was like, what's next? So in that process, we were looking at applications that we as a team actually used quite often, and we stumbled upon Artifactory. We've been using Artifactory by JFrog for over a year before this. It was working pretty well, and we use that for all of our artifact repository needs. And we're thinking, okay, well, this might be a good candidate for Habitat. So the first thing we did is we said, okay, this is an application we owned. That's cool. But even better, there was already a core plan in existence for Artifactory Pro. Announced last year at ChefConf, there were some core plans that got brought up. And Artifactory was one of those that got mentioned. And so we thought, perfect. I mean, everything's done. We can just use that. But that's almost the case. We found out that the version that we had a core plan for was pretty out of date. So what do? We've got something that is already out there. How can we leverage that? So we rolled up our sleeves, we entered the studio after cloning our repo, and we got to work. We started by going to JFrog's website, and we got a checksum and a version number. That's it, 2 things. We updated 2 lines of code in our core plan, and we started to build. So we got our information there, and we went into the studio, we built our artifact, and everything went off without a hitch. It just spun up. It was really awesome. And we were able to see that after these updates worked, this was kind of a thing we talked about, like giving back to the community a little bit. So we submitted our first pull request to the community, and we were able to get it approved, and it started living its life out there for anybody to consume it. So now that we had Artifactory, it worked, it was pretty cool, but it didn't quite meet our needs as it was. Artifactory, if you just run it out of the box, uses an internal Derby database, and it stores its own binaries that are used in there in its own container. We learned in a hard way in a demo that we blew up a Docker container very quickly by putting way too much stuff into it after just a few days, and that wasn't good. So what we did is we leveraged MS SQL in Azure for our database needs. So we took the database out of the container and shipped it out into Azure. And then, using an NFS share that was created for us by our compute platforms team, we were able to get all of our storage needs met outside of the container. And what was really cool about this is we were able to use Artifactory only for I/O. So it's only being accessed, or Artifactory is only going to handle files going in and out. It itself doesn't actually store any data or doesn't actually keep a database inside its own container. And so one thing we'll notice after going on this journey is you become a core plan contributor. And this, for me, is something I'm very passionate about, which is free and open source software, getting out in the community. And after a year of constantly updating Artifactory Pro, I actually became the core plan maintainer for this. And that's been pretty cool to be a part of the community that way. Oh, thank you. Well, and actually, as a side note, just yesterday, or 2 days ago, I was sitting at the community summit, and somebody submitted a killer pull request, which totally redid half of Artifactory, and it's awesome. And we're going to be implementing that soon. So that's the joy of this, right? Getting to see the community go crazy. So what else did we learn? We learned that we could run a third-party application just fine in Habitat. Similar to what Barry was talking about, this is something off the shelf. We were able to get it in there and use it right away. And it helped that there was a core plan available, of course. And we could also run an on-premise Docker application at Alaska. And this was a first for us. We're still new into the container space. And so this was our very first chance to actually leverage Docker and use that in a production environment. And finally, we were able to contribute to the Habitat community. And not only contribute, but I'll say a huge thing here too is the Habitat community Slack is your best friend. When we started out here, we were noobs beyond noobs, and we still are, right? And we wanted to learn, and the community was nothing but encouraging. You ask a question, no matter how foolish you think you may sound, like everyone's going to be there to help out and help you feel welcome. So I can't stress that enough. And yeah, core plans are awesome. We were able to find this plan, and even though it was a little out of date, we just ran one command and we got it up and running. So with that, we're going to show you this live and how fast you can do this. I don't know if any of you have installed Artifactory. If not, think of it as a yeah, so, it's horrible, right? Yeah, it's not fun. And so, and actually, I'm working with my buddy James here on a Habitat project we just started last night. It's like 50 pages of instructions. It's terrible, but when you spin it up in Habitat, it's suddenly not a bad deployment. So we'll go ahead and show you what this looks like for us running in Docker. I'll admit, I have not used a Mac in a while because I switched to Linux, so let's see if I can do my Mac sauce here.
Let me know if you need help.
I'll try.
So far, so good.
Macs are hard. Hey, I did it. All right. OK, so we're going to run one simple command here and fire up Artifactory Pro just like we would have, minus the Azure backend, because we don't need to do that for a demo. But I'm also the king of typos, so let's see how this runs. So I'm typing in one command here, docker start -it. I'm forwarding the port so we can see it at localhost port 8081. This is in a personal repo at the moment. So one command here, we're going to fire this away. And that is awesome because I didn't do, helps if I actually type in the right command. Nick, I probably should have done what you talked about. You said do up arrow. I'm like, oh, I'll type it live. That's good. OK, so what we're seeing right here is the package is just kicking off. I ran one command, and it's going through right now. It's setting up all the internals of the database, which is good times. But this is the local Derby database. And it's cool. You can watch the actual output in this view just to see how much stuff is happening in Habitat right now. So it looks like we're churning through. Database is still running. I feel like I'm narrating a horse race. So I have to make a small pitch for Linux. I'm sorry, Nick. I got to do it. I run Fedora on my laptop. This thing builds in about 15 seconds. So we'll see. What are we at? 26. That's not bad. All right. So let's go over here. We're going to click and look at our local instance. And voila, we have Artifactory stood up in 26 seconds using Habitat. None of those pain points that we had before. So for us, this really was like our beloved 737-900 ER. I mean, this thing's a workhorse. We use Artifactory all the time. We have other teams that join into this production instance. They love it. We use it all the time. And what's been really cool about this is we've been running this steadily for over a year. It's been churning around. And when we switched from our physical, well, not physical, it was VM running, Artifactory to Habitat, no one noticed that we made that transition. So from an end user standpoint, they just knew Artifactory worked. They didn't have to experience a downtime or anything crazy. So yeah, that's what this was like for us, and we were pretty stoked about it. It just works. Back to you,
26
Nick.
seconds isn't bad, though.
Okay, I'll have to give the Mac a little bit of credit there. It's good.
So let's move on to an app that we created, which we called Bootstrap. So a while back, during one of our team meetings, we came up with an idea for a tool that we wanted to build for ourselves. We thought it'd be useful to have a self-service bootstrapping utility to remove the need to give individual Chef server accounts to people just for bootstrapping. And since we had a new application that we wanted to build, we thought, well, why not do it in Habitat? So this is what we built. It's a very simple tool. We use it by just populating the information that's requested. You click the button that says Start Bootstrap. And when it's done, you either get a success message or the console output of the error that occurred. So this is a very simple Ruby app. It uses the lightweight web frameworks Sinatra. And we also chose to do it in Ruby because Habitat scaffolding exists. So let's mention a little bit more on Habitat scaffolding. If we go back to the previous project, this is our Artifactory Pro plan.sh, and this does not include any Habitat scaffolding. Because this is not a simple Ruby application, it just required a little more effort, but it's still not too bad. But now let's look at a plan for Bootstrap, which does have Habitat scaffolding. So that's it. I mean, line 4, that's where we included the scaffolding for Ruby, and it solves a lot of the work for us. It grabs the dependencies found in the gem file via bundler, handles all the hooks for the application, and greatly simplifies the packaging. It takes advantage of a lot of hard work that other smart people have done for us. So if you are planning to do any work on a project which uses Ruby or Node, there is no reason why you shouldn't look at using Habitat scaffolding. So this was also the first production application running that we 100% developed ourselves. And a very cool feature of Habitat is that it gives us a seamless update process. This project uses rolling updates, which allows this service to be up and available the entire time when it's being upgraded. So this here was really just a basic project, but it also provides very useful functionality. And then as a side note, we have on our Alaska Airlines GitHub page a parallel bootstrapping utility.
It's pretty cool.
And we do kind of hope at some point to integrate that into this, but we'll see. That's down the line. So what did we learn in this exercise? We started to learn what the process is like from a traditional developer's point of view, which really will help us onboard developers down the road. It's important for us to be knowledgeable in the tool and how it's used in order for us to be better at teaching peers when we start working with them on new projects. We also learned that Habitat scaffolding is extremely useful and makes Habitat development a whole lot easier. And this project for us really felt like our 737 Combi. It's also called the Mudhead. It's certainly not the prettiest, but it really just does get the job done. And it provides an extremely useful function. So the Combi was actually retired last year from service, but this was an airplane that provided the very essential service for providing goods and services to rural Alaska. Excuse me. They were great on short runways. They could land on gravel or ice or any unpaved runway. Very long tradition of use in Alaska. I flew on them quite a bit when I was growing up in Alaska, so I have a fondness for these jets.
So for our final demo or project we wanted to talk to you about, this was our use of Vault and Console. So a little bit of history we've been using for over a year, actually a year plus. Actually, I think it was back in 2016. We got Vault and Console stood up that we use for secrets management with Chef, and it worked well. And we were trying to think, what's another way we can utilize Habitat? We've got these other applications going. What's another use? And so we said, hey, it's another third-party app. Let's give this one a shot and see what we can do. There was a little bit of an interesting take on this one, though. So our original console and Vault design followed a standard that is pretty well known. We had multiple Ubuntu servers, so we'll just say 5 for this instance. Each of them were running console and then as the backend, and then using Vault. And this is pretty typical. You'd see this architecture around almost anywhere for running VMs with Chef. But there was a big issue here, and that was the actual host OS. And what we found is that with using console and Vault in this way, our Vault was sealing. We have automatic processes like we had our pipelines, we had people who were just kind of had applications that would query Vault. Those would stop working, and we'd find out that our Vault was sealing. I'd get a lot of messages from the team like, the Vault sealed again, you know, what's going on here? And we did some digging and realized that kernel level updates on the host OS were causing Vault to seal. And so it's essentially freaking out, and it was saying, okay, I'm not going to let this work, and it would seal itself. So we needed something to get around that. So our first really truly rugged Habitat deployment of Vault in Habitat or Vault and Console in Habitat kind of mimicked what we did with Chef. We spun up 5 Ubuntu servers. With Chef, we used Chef Automate, so we had a cookbook that we ran through our pipeline. We used the Habitat community cookbook to actually run our Habitat packages. And we used the same load balancing that we used before. So we leveraged our F5 LTM to actually figure out which Vault node is the leader, and it would work like that. And this worked really well. This was a good way for us to operate. And it provided real stability. When we were using this model, we had 0 Vault seals that were unintentional. We saw stability. I didn't get any text messages from the team anymore about that. And better than that, we had customers who didn't complain. It was working really well. But we weren't done here. Part of what we do on our team is always innovate. We want to say, you know, what else can we do? How can we improve? And so we thought, we need to scale this better. We want to do a better job of that. So that, actually, I'll skip. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself there. I apologize. Before I go back to the scaling, so what we did is we actually implemented Habitat's health monitoring here. And Lewis's project and the internship level was key for that. We wanted to know how we could actually see which node was a leader in a Habitat ring. And there is an internal in Habitat that is just awesome. I don't know how hard this is to read in the back, but on line 6 in here, there's the beginning of a case statement. It's looking for service.me.leader. And this right here is what allowed us to actually be queried by our LTM to see which Vault node was actually the leader in our ring. And this is awesome. This is built into Habitat, and it's documented on the Habitat website, and it has really changed the way that we've done health monitoring. Somebody had a ring alert. I thought it was mine for a second. So yeah, so back, sorry, I jumped ahead before. So where did we go from here? You know, we decided for scalability, we want to take our Vault and Console environment and take it into Kubernetes. So this is something brand new. We just deployed this a few weeks ago. And now we have a stable offering that we can scale at using some pretty cool tools. The biggest one here is utilizing the Habitat operator for Kubernetes. It's been talked about a little bit during ChefConf here, but I highly recommend you check it out. It's on the Habitat GitHub page with more information. But this is really the engine that lets us use our Habitat artifacts in Kubernetes and be able to scale it. And now we have Console and Vault spread across multiple Kubernetes nodes, and eventually our goal is to take this across data centers. So right now we have it all in one data center, but we're not done there. We want to take it up into Azure and take it to our other data center in Eastern Washington. And this right here is just an example of one of our test environments of the sort of stability that we get out of the gate with Kubernetes. So right here we have 5 console instances running. Once again, I apologize if it's hard to see in the back. But out of these 5, they're pretty well balanced across 3 different nodes running Kubernetes. And each Vault instance is on its own unique node. And this is balancing that comes in Kubernetes by itself. Nothing we really had to put into place ourselves. And as we had mentioned a few times before, the Habitat project is really all about community. And being able to really dive into Vault and Console and do some cool stuff with it, we ourselves found ourselves the maintainers of these packages as well. I actually have to give a shout out to Graham in the back because he made a huge contribution to Console just about 3 weeks ago. So that was awesome, by the way. So that's the thing. You can become involved here and be part of the community and actually help maintain the products you really care about. So what did we learn? We learned that we can take an app with stability issues that we saw before and make it stable with Habitat. And we can also take on a challenge in Habitat and be successful. This was something very new for us. We were trying to think, how are we going to take something that's kind of buggy and actually make it work in Habitat? This is still new to us. But we were able to take on a challenge with the help of the community and be successful. And finally, health monitors are our friend, especially utilizing our LTMs to see which nodes are healthy. We've been able to get where we want to go for stability. And when these things all come together, they really form something that's truly next gen. By drawing on our experiences in Hab so far, we were able to make something that turned out to be pretty awesome. But we're not done yet.
All right, so these are all examples of things that we've done since we've started exploring Habitat. These really were like the first 4 things that we've done. We are definitely going to do more. In fact, I think in the past 12 hours, you guys have started like 4 new projects. It's kind of...
I don't know if it's that many, but we got a couple of cool ones coming.
Yeah, you were. Don't lie. I saw you.
It's more like 8. Yeah, that's right. He's my boss, I have to say this.
But in the beginning, we absolutely knew nothing about Habitat, but we put in some time to learn for ourselves what could be done. We absolutely ran into issues along the way, but that's just part of the learning process. Eventually, we figured it out, and like Chris said, leaning on the Habitat community absolutely helped us get there. Through these projects, we became better at delivering quality Habitat packages, and our velocity continued to increase. So if you have been interested in Habitat but aren't sure if it'll work for you, our advice is just to try it.
Yeah.
Looking back, there were a few decisions which really helped us get off the ground, and I want to share a couple of those with you. When you first begin, start with a very, very small, simple project. This is advice that I heard all the time from Chef, from others in the community on everything automation, and it really was true. It's very easy to get too ambitious and try to pick something early on that's this kind of, the big win, but don't. Do the complete opposite. Start extremely small, and if you think it's a project that's, small, go smaller. This has always been excellent advice, and I really wish you would use it. It's hard to, but try. And then when you do start working on an application that you plan to eventually release into production, it's much easier to start with something that you own, like something that your team fully owns, you have 100% control of, because you will make mistakes, and when you do run into issues, it's much easier to work within the team to work through it than it is to engage with another team. And really test the load balancing. This is one of the first challenges that we had to overcome. And when you're testing, just play with the nodes. See what it's going to do and how it's going to respond. Get familiar with how it reacts so you just learn what to expect as you're doing your load balancing and trying to understand how you can balance these nodes across multiple data centers. And if you are planning to do a project with Ruby, Node, or Gradle, Habitat scaffolding is absolutely going to help. So definitely look into that. And the learning curve was relatively short for anyone getting into it. But the first time definitely took some dedicated time to figure out the basics. So give yourself that time and don't expect to nail Habitat on your very first project. We definitely, like I said, got better over time. So if you're interested in Habitat, just try it. We are a large, risk-averse enterprise, and we have found success using it. If you're concerned about using it in production, don't be. We've been running our services in production for about a year now with no concerns.
Over a year.
And Habitat is just an awesome platform. Don't be afraid to try it. And core plans are excellent too. They are an awesome resource. There's a whole bunch that are already out there. And in the process of using them, if you find an opportunity to contribute back to the community, definitely do that. It's helping make it better for everybody. So with that, we just wanted to say thank you for coming and hearing how we started on our Habitat journey. We still have a long way to go. And if you have any questions, I think we still have a few minutes for some Q&A. If you'd rather buy us a drink later, that's fine too.
That works too.
But yeah, thank you again. And if you have questions, happy to hear them.
Thank you.
I've talked to a lot of people about Habitat here, and there seems to be confusion about exactly what it does and especially how its value proposition differs from Docker and Kubernetes that also talk about application portability across data centers. So how did you articulate to other people within the company what the value was of Habitat over those other platforms.
So to be fair, that's still a message we're still crafting for ourselves. We've been working with it. We've been understanding it as a team. We're now, since we've gotten experience, seeing the real value that it can provide. And we want to have some demonstrations. We want to have something to show when we take the message back to our community and try to get more interest in what Habitat can do for other teams and their problems.
So what does Habitat give you in Kubernetes, for example, and vice versa? What value do they bring to each other?
So I can say for us with that is just the ease that we can deploy our applications. So with what we have in Kubernetes, with Habitat, it's very easy. Say we want to get an update to console. I look out in the community. There's a stable branch of console. We want to go to it. We test it. I can get that shipped out into our environment really easy using the Habitat operator. So we're, like I said, this is still a newer environment, but I can just go into my Kubernetes YAML file, for example, and specify like which tag, for example, I want to use for our version of console, and it will seamlessly update that. For a similar, I mean, Nell did a killer job of demoing that yesterday. I don't know if anybody saw that at the keynote, but it was fantastic, showing that exact update process in Kubernetes. And if that's on YouTube already, I don't know, but it's a fantastic demo to answer that.
Hi, my name's David. I work at Chef and I work on Habitat. I'd love to talk to you more about that after the session. So I have my quick elevator pitch of Habitat and Kubernetes and differentiation there is Kubernetes expects you to show up to the party with a whole bunch of Docker containers ready to go. And there's a big question. Everyone has this question of, well, where do those containers come from? How do you get them in the first place? How do you build your application? And because you really care about your build process. And Habitat gives that to you. Yeah. I have sort of a selfish question.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to learn what you would consider the basics of Habitat? And then how long would you say it took you to become an expert or learn advanced Habitat concepts?
So that's a good question. So I really, I kind of got introduced into Habitat last year at ChefConf. There was the intensive one-day like Habitat session, and that was where I really was able to dive in. Ian Henry taught that one. It was a fantastic session. So that's really where I got the basics. And then after that, it was shortly right after that we did the Artifactory Pro. So that was kind of our first real dive into that after some, like we said, the internship project. So for time, I don't know, I felt like I could start dinking with it after like a day of diving into it, but really to become, I mean, I still don't consider myself proficient in it. It's always learning, right? Would take a few weeks of really just getting in there to learn. Plus the documentation now on Habitat site is really good. A year ago, I remember it was lacking a little bit, but now the tutorials are pretty awesome.
Yeah, back to that internship project, I talked to Lewis about it on Monday. By Friday, he already had his application deployed in a ring in one location. Yep. And then we quickly switched to advanced level, and I said, well, let's take it everywhere. So that part took a little longer, but that initial startup, within a week, he was already running, he was going.
And kind of just real quick on top of that, the community was huge too. In fact, I remember when Lewis did this, he reached out to the community and like 3 people were like, let's get on a Zoom right now. And even Adam was on that call. And it was just to talk to Lewis about the idea. So yeah, can't stress that enough.
So I've used your console plan actually.
Oh wow, cool.
How do you guys build your console clusters so that the other clusters or the other nodes discover
That is a very good question. In fact, I don't know if the gentleman's here who actually submitted a pull request. Is that you? Yes. Okay. All right. I'd love to talk to you about that. So I think I mentioned it to you before.
I see a hug coming.
Oh yeah, this hug offs to the extreme. I'm so happy you're here. So one thing that we leveraged and it's worked well for us is actually in the config file that is in Habitat. We actually use Habitat attributes in there, so it then adds every subsequent new member of the ring into that config file. And I can show you, I've got the code. You know, I'm so mad. I almost brought my laptop and I'm like, oh, I'm speaking. I don't need my laptop. Now I'm going to bum yours if that's okay. But yeah, I'd love to show you what we did because we pretty much took the console plan, used our own that consumes that. I don't want to say like a wrapper cookbook, but it's similar to the same sort of thing. And so it consumes it, but then it uses that updated config file. And every time we add another Habitat node in there, it just pops up. So I'd be happy to show you. It works really well.
So very quickly,
Yes.
one thing that I haven't seen in Habitat, and it's something that we are struggling on, is databases. And not talking about building the database and executing maybe DMLs, but managing the reference data in the database. So there is a bunch of DDLs that you always run. So if you are working in a large, I work for Walgreens, it's a $500,000, $500 million program, dozens of Scrum teams in 4 or 5 different worlds. Every 2 weeks we have a release. Have you ever looked into how to use Habitat or any other tools to manage data being pushed, reference data that is needed by the application? So what I see, if I can use it correctly, is that a developer comes to me and says, hey, I need to test a bug in this version for this sprint, for this application. Boom, I spin up a container, let's say with my SQL server, with all the data they need, ready to test in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, I mean,
So like I mentioned, so that's like part of the always learning. That's where I have not had exposure to that. David, do you have any insight on that? Sorry to put you on the spot. You're like the Habitat dude, so.
sure.
And I'd love to talk more about that afterward too.
I
but,
mean, we tried Flyway, but it's very limited unless
Yeah.
you want to pay them a lot of money, but I'm looking for ideas.
Okay, yeah, let's talk.
So hi, my name is Rishi, and I work for Capgemini, and I run the DevOps practice for North America. The question which I have is, I have large financial services companies, and they have invested a lot of, I would say, money, to procure, specific tools around this continuous integration and this release management, like the tools from Zevia Labs, from CARA, from Urban Code. How does it all integrates with that, and what is a business case for me to move out of those and kind of, switch to Habitat?
Well, the nice thing about Habitat is that you can just pull down the bits right now and get started with it. See if it actually fits the need that you have, and then from that point you can make a educated decision on which way you want to go. But it's open. It's a project you can use and leverage and just experiment. And do change? Go do change? Yeah.
And I know for me, one big selling point to it that I personally like is the fact that I can build an artifact and run it on my laptop, and I know even though it's slower, it'll run on Nick's laptop, and then and then. But then I can take that and I know it's going to run in Kubernetes. I know it's going to run just plain Docker if I deployed it that way. Or even in native Hab. We originally, I forgot to mention that in our original Habitat instance ran native Hab. It wasn't running in Docker. So that's what I personally get out of it, is that when it is packaged like that, I know it's just going to work and it doesn't matter where it lives. So I don't know if that answers your question. But
I'm from New Zealand, all the way down
cool.
south.
Wow.
And when we talk about Kubernetes, there is the so-called concept of Helm charts. That has its own repo with an open source community working on a lot of these tools. Like I was sitting here and looking up Vault is there as a Helm chart as well. Do you run the risk of going against the community? Not against is not, it's a very strong word, but then it's about you are working on a Habitat package which may not be having the same functionality as the other Helm charts which is going on.
So no, that's a great question. In fact, we actually had some developers come out to us. We engaged with them a few weeks ago who are interested in using Helm charts. So funny enough, you mentioned that. So we are not using that in our team. So we're still pretty new to the Kubernetes game on my team. And so we're eventually going to go that route, looking with other engagements on other teams that may not be using Habitat. But as far as like the two fighting, I mean, I wouldn't say.
I wouldn't say they're fighting either.
Yeah.
No, we want to use them to their strengths and use them together, and finding the patterns that just really work the best. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for your questions.
thank you very
That's
much.
Unfortunately, all the time we have. But can we get a quick round of applause for Nick and Chris?
Thank you. Good job, Brian.